Well, let me tell you about the day the Galactic Combat Federation learned why you should never, ever underestimate a species that evolved on a planet, trying to kill them every single day. Station Nexus 7 was buzzing with excitement that morning, and by buzzing, I mean literally buzzing, because half the spectators were insectoid species whose wings vibrated when they got excited. The arena itself was a masterpiece of engineering, a massive dome that could simulate any environment, complete with gravity adjusters, atmospheric controls, and medical bays that could patch up beings from over 300 different species. Of course, nobody thought they'd need those medical bays for what was supposed to be a routine demonstration. Admiral Vashi, a distinguished Zentorian with silver scales that caught the arena lights just perfectly, was leaning against the observation deck railing, chatting with General Kraftnog. Now, Kraftnog was what you'd call imposing. 8 feet tall, built like a walking tank, with tusks that could open canned food and a military record longer than most species' entire histories. "This should be over quickly," Admiral Vashi said, adjusting his ceremonial sash with one of his 4 arms. "The betting pools are calling it a 30-second match, maybe 40 if the human tries to run." General Kraftnog grunted, which was his way of agreeing with everything. Bioengineered predators don't mess around. Mortyn has been undefeated in 17 matches across 9 different gravity settings. The poor creature they're sending in doesn't stand a chance. That's when Amy Kowalski walked in. Now, let me paint you a picture here. Amy was about 5.5 feet tall, which made her absolutely tiny by galactic standards. She had brown hair tied back in what humans call a ponytail, wore simple gray combat gear, and looked about as threatening as a Fluffian kitten. The alien spectators took one look at her and immediately started laughing. Well, the ones that could laugh. The others made their species-equivalent noise, which sounded like everything from dying air compressors to musical instruments being tortured. "Is that seriously the replacement fighter?" wheezed a Gorthak merchant, his tentacles shaking with amusement. "I've seen scarier things in my breakfast cereal. Look at those tiny muscles," chittered a hive mind representative. "Does she even lift weights, or just lift her own spirits?" The betting pools went absolutely insane. Odds that were already heavily favored against the human fighter jumped from 50 to 1 to 500 to 1 in about 30 seconds. Aliens were practically throwing credits at the bookmakers, some betting their entire savings accounts on what they saw as the easiest money they'd ever make. That's when they brought out Mortyn. Sweet suffering stars, if Amy looked unthreatening, Mortyn looked like someone's nightmare had nightmares. 12 feet of pure bioengineered terror, with muscle fibers that had been genetically enhanced for maximum power output. His arms were longer than Amy was tall, ending in claws that could slice through reinforced steel plating. His legs were like tree trunks, designed for explosive movement and bone-crushing kicks. And his head, well, let's just say nature never intended anything to have that many teeth in one mouth. The crowd went silent when Mortyn entered the arena. Even the insectoids stopped buzzing. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted sentient beings," announced Judge Quintara over the arena's sound system. Quintara was a judicial Nexian, which meant he was supposedly impartial, but everyone could hear the smugness in his translated voice. "Today's exhibition match will demonstrate the superiority of advanced bioengineering over primitive evolutionary development." He paused dramatically, his 6 eyes focusing on Amy with what could only be described as condescending pity. "Combat will continue until one participant yields, becomes incapacitated, or another pause, requires medical intervention. Standard gravity will be maintained at 1.2 universal standard, atmosphere will remain oxygen-nitrogen compatible, and medical teams are standing by." What Judge Quintara didn't say, but everyone understood, was that the medical teams were really only there for one participant. After all, who brings medical equipment to scrape someone off the arena floor? Amy stood in her corner, rolling her shoulders and cracking her knuckles, a sound that made several nearby aliens flinch for reasons they couldn't quite explain. She looked around the arena with mild interest, like someone checking out a new restaurant before deciding what to order. Mortyn, meanwhile, was prowling his side of the arena, displaying for the crowd, flexing muscles that could probably bench press a small spacecraft. The stage was set, the bets were placed, and everyone settled in to watch what they thought would be the shortest, most one-sided match in Galactic Combat Federation history. They were absolutely right about it being one-sided. Now, while the crowd was busy congratulating themselves on their easy money, Commander Tom Mali was having what humans might call a bad feeling about this. Mali had actually served alongside humans during the Cathari border conflicts, which meant he was one of the few beings in the arena who knew exactly what they were all about to witness. "Excuse me, Judge Quintara," Mali called out, his blue-scaled hands waving frantically. "I really think you should reconsider this match. Humans aren't exactly what they appear to be." Judge Quintara's 6 eyes rolled in 6 different directions, which was his species' way of showing maximum disdain. "Commander Mali, please. We've run full biological scans. This creature has standard carbon-based musculature, primitive bone density, and reflexes that barely register on our equipment. What could it possibly do against a perfected bioweapon?" "Well, that's just it," Mali tried again. "Their equipment doesn't really measure human. Attention beings," boomed Mortyn's voice over the arena speakers, cutting off Mali's warning completely. Mortyn was the kind of announcer who believed volume could substitute for personality, and he was absolutely loving this moment. "Feast your optical organs on Mortyn the Unstoppable. 17 victories, 0 defeats, genetically enhanced reflexes, 30 times faster than baseline organic responses." The crowd roared their approval as Mortyn flexed again, this time actually cracking the reinforced flooring under his feet. Meanwhile, Quartermaster was having the best day of his entire career. A squat, 4-armed Berlaxian with a head for numbers and absolutely no sense of when something was too good to be true, he was frantically processing bets on his quantum calculator. "Current odds stand at 800 to 1 against the human," he announced gleefully. "We've got beings betting their savings, their ships, their firstborn offspring. This is the biggest single-match betting pool in Federation history." Over in the technical booth, Brandon Torres and his crew were setting up recording equipment with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for documenting historical events. Torres, a methodical Centaurian with excellent attention to detail, was adjusting camera angles and checking audio levels. "Make sure we get good close-ups of the impact moments," Torres instructed his team. The biology departments across 12 universities want detailed footage of bio-enhanced combat techniques. This could revolutionize our understanding of predator dynamics. Little did Torres know he was about to revolutionize their understanding of something entirely different. Down in the arena, Amy was doing her warm-up routine, and well, let's just say it wasn't what anyone expected. She started with some light stretching, touching her toes with an ease that made several vertebrate species feel inadequate. Then she did a few jumping jacks, which looked absolutely ridiculous to beings who had never seen such a movement. But it was when she started shadowboxing that things got really confusing. Her movements were wrong, somehow. Too fluid, too quick, like she was operating under different physical laws than everyone else. When she threw a practice punch, the air actually made a soft whooshing sound that caused several predator species to suddenly feel very uncomfortable without knowing why. What exactly is she doing?" Admiral Vashi asked, his scales shifting to a nervous purple. "Warming up, apparently," General Kraftnog replied, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Here's how Amy had ended up in this mess. The original human fighter, a professional named Jackson Webb, had come down with Rigelian flux about 6 hours before the match. Amy, who was just a cargo handler on a freight ship that happened to be docked at the station, had volunteered as a replacement when she heard they needed someone, quote, roughly human-shaped and willing to get knocked around for 5 minutes. The Federation officials had been so desperate to maintain their schedule that they'd accepted her application without bothering to ask about her background. If they had asked, they might have learned that Amy had spent 8 years in the Solar Marines, specialized in close-quarters combat, and held 3 different martial arts championships on worlds where the gravity was twice Earth normal. But hey, why ask questions when you've got a sure thing, right? Combatants, prepare for engagement. Judge Quintara's voice echoed through the arena as the energy barriers dropped. May the superior biological design prove victorious. Mortyn stepped forward with all the grace and menace of a walking extinction event. Each footstep sent vibrations through the arena floor that registered on seismic equipment 3 levels down. His bioengineered muscles rippled under skin that had been specifically designed to deflect energy weapons and small explosives. Those claws, sweet stars, those claws extended another 6 inches, gleaming like surgical instruments made of nightmare fuel. The crowd fell silent as Mortyn began his intimidation display. This was a creature programmed at the genetic level to be the perfect predator. He roared, and it wasn't just noise, it was a sound specifically engineered to trigger fear responses in over 200 different species' nervous systems. The arena's acoustic dampeners actually struggled to contain it. Several spectators in the front rows visibly shuddered. A few smaller species fainted outright. Even Admiral Vashi's military composure cracked slightly as his scales shifted to a defensive gray pattern. Amy looked up from checking her shoelaces. "Seriously?" she said, and her voice carried perfectly in the sudden silence. "That's your scary noise? My neighbor's cat makes more intimidating sounds when I'm late with dinner." The crowd exchanged confused glances. Was the human mocking a bioengineered apex predator? Did she not understand that she was about to become an appetizer? Mortyn's head tilted, his enhanced sensory organs trying to process this unexpected response. His threat display had never failed before. Every opponent had either fled, surrendered, or at least shown proper terror. This small, soft creature was commenting on his technique. Begin combat. Judge Quintera announced, clearly eager to get this embarrassing display over with. Mortyn exploded into motion. Now, when I say exploded, I mean literally exploded. His bio-enhanced leg muscles were designed to generate enough force to launch his 12-foot frame across the arena in a single bound. The reinforced floor cracked under the pressure. The air displacement from his movement actually ruffled the clothing of spectators 30 feet away. He covered the distance to Amy in 0.7 seconds, which was supposed to be faster than most organic beings could even process visual information, let alone react to it. Amy stepped sideways. Not jumped, not dove, not scrambled desperately out of the way. She just took one casual step to her left, like someone avoiding a puddle on the sidewalk. Mortyn sailed past her and crashed into the arena wall with enough force to crack the reinforced polymer coating. The crowd went dead silent. Moran's voice crackled over the speakers. That was unexpected. Mortyn appears to have missed his initial strike. Admiral Vashi leaned forward. How did she? The reaction time alone should have been impossible. Humans have unusual reflexes, Commander Mali muttered, but nobody was listening to him anymore. Mortyn picked himself up from the wall, his bio-enhanced systems already repairing minor damage. His programming kicked in target acquisition, threat assessment, attack pattern optimization. This time he wouldn't underestimate his prey. He circled Amy like the perfect predator he was designed to be, looking for openings, calculating angles of attack. His enhanced brain processed thousands of combat scenarios in seconds. Amy stood in the center of the arena, slowly rotating to keep him in sight, looking about as concerned as someone waiting for a bus. "Are we doing this, or are you just going to keep walking in circles?" she asked. "Because I've got a cargo shift in 3 hours and I'd really like to grab lunch first." Mortyn struck again, this time with a calculated combination attack. Left claw swipe, right leg sweep, finishing with a bite that could crack titanium alloy. A 3-part assault that no organic creature should be able to counter. Amy ducked under the first swipe, somehow managing to bend in a way that didn't look physically possible. The claw passed inches over her head, close enough to ruffle her hair. She stepped back from the leg sweep with timing so precise it looked choreographed. And when Mortyn lunged forward with those titanium-cracking jaws, she put her hand on his forehead and held him at arm's length. Let me repeat that, because even I have trouble believing it. A 5.5-foot human held back a 12-foot bioengineered predator with one hand. Mortyn's legs scrambled for purchase, his claws swiped frantically at empty air, and his jaws snapped uselessly about 6 inches short of Amy's thoroughly unimpressed face. "Okay, this is just embarrassing," Amy said, still holding the frantically struggling apex predator at bay with what appeared to be minimal effort. "Did nobody test this thing before they brought it out here?" The betting pools had gone completely insane. Quartermaster was staring at his quantum calculator like it had personally betrayed him. The odds were updating so fast the display was just a blur of numbers. In the technical booth, Brandon Torres had stopped adjusting cameras and was just standing there with his mouth hanging open. "Are we recording this? Please tell me we're recording this." General Kraftnog was furiously taking notes. Impossible leverage ratio center of gravity-defying standard physics threat assessment protocols require immediate revision. Mortyn's bio-enhanced brain was having what humans might call a complete system crash. Every instinct, every programmed response, every genetic modification was screaming that this should not be happening. He was the apex predator. He was perfection incarnate. He was being held off by a cargo handler who looked bored. "Look," Amy said reasonably, "I get that you're supposed to be scary and all, but this really isn't working out the way anyone planned. Maybe we should just call it a day?" Mortyn's response was to roar again and redouble his efforts, claws now leaving gouges in the arena floor as he tried to get enough leverage to break free from Amy's casual grip. That's when Amy sighed, and everyone who knew humans well enough would have recognized that sigh. It was the sound a human makes right before they stop being patient. Now, what happened next has been analyzed by xenobiologists, combat specialists, and theoretical physicists across 17 different star systems. There are entire academic papers written about the following 37 seconds. Universities offer advanced degrees in applied human combat dynamics based solely on studying this moment. But honestly, it was really quite simple. Amy got bored. "All right," she said, still holding the struggling Mortyn at arm's length like a particularly aggressive house pet. "I tried to be nice about this. But you're really not getting the hint, are you?" She let go. Mortyn, who had been straining against her grip with every ounce of his bio-enhanced strength, suddenly found himself flying backward from his own momentum. But here's where things got interesting. Instead of crashing into the arena wall again, he managed to twist in mid-air, land on his feet, and immediately launch himself forward in what his programming calculated as a perfect surprise counterattack. Amy stepped to the right. But this wasn't like her previous casual sidesteps. This time, airy, she moved with a fluid precision that made several alien physicists in the audience start frantically recalculating their understanding of momentum and mass distribution. She didn't just dodge Mortyn's attack, she positioned herself. Mortyn sailed past her left shoulder, close enough that his claws actually caught her sleeve. For a split second, it looked like he might have finally landed a hit. The crowd held its collective breath. And then Amy's right fist came up in a short, economical arc that connected with Mortyn's solar plexus with a sound like a thunderclap. Now, let me explain something about that punch, because the physics of it still keeps alien scientists up at night. Amy weighed maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. Mortyn weighed over 800 pounds of bioengineered muscle and reinforced bone structure. By every law of physics that the Galactic Federation understood, Amy's punch should have been like a mosquito hitting a starship. Instead, Mortyn stopped. I don't mean he slowed down, or staggered, or even got knocked backward. I mean he stopped, completely, instantly. Like he had just run into an immovable wall that happened to be shaped like a human fist. The silence in the arena was so complete you could hear individual spectators breathing. Mortyn hung there in mid-air for what felt like an eternity, his enhanced neural network trying to process what had just happened to him. His eyes, those bioengineered predator eyes that could track a target moving at 3 times the speed of sound, went completely blank. Amy said, examining her knuckles like she was checking for scratches. That was easier than expected. Then she cracked her neck. It was just a simple movement, tilting her head to the left, then to the right, producing a soft series of pops that any human would recognize as perfectly normal. But to the assembled alien crowd, that casual neck crack sounded like gunshots, or breaking bones, or the structural failure of something very, very important. Admiral Vashi's jaw dropped. Literally. His lower mandible disconnected from his upper skull and hung there, swaying gently in the recycled air. General Kraftnog's tactical assessment notebook slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers. Judge Quintara's 6 eyes were all focused on the same impossible sight, pupils dilated in what his species called existential confusion. In the betting booth, Quartermaster was staring at his quantum calculator, which was displaying error messages in 17 different languages. Several of them were just variations of "this should not be possible." Mortyn's voice crackled over the arena speakers, but for the first time in his career, the professional announcer was completely speechless. That is, we appear to have Mortyn was still floating there, suspended in that moment of impossible physics, his bio-enhanced brain running diagnostic after diagnostic, trying to understand why all his systems were reporting critical errors simultaneously. His genetic programming was screaming contradictory instructions: retreat from superior predator, engage designated target, recalibrate threat assessment, initiate emergency protocols. The medical teams were already moving, because even though nothing made sense anymore, they could recognize the look of someone whose biological systems had just received more input than they were designed to process. Is the match over?" asked a small voice from the crowd. It was a young Zentorian, maybe barely old enough to attend combat exhibitions, speaking with the kind of innocent confusion that cut through the surreal atmosphere like a laser. Amy looked around the arena, taking in the sea of slack-jawed faces, the floating predator who was still trying to process what had happened to him, and the officials who were clearly having some kind of collective nervous breakdown. "I mean, if he's not going to keep fighting, then yeah, I guess we're done here," she said with a shrug. "Is there like a victory ceremony or something? Because I really do need to get back to work." That's when Mortyn finally fell. It wasn't a collapse exactly. It was more like someone had suddenly remembered to turn gravity back on. He dropped straight down, landing in a sitting position with a thud that registered on seismic equipment. His bio-enhanced healing systems were already working overtime, but it was his mind that was taking the real damage. Everything he had been programmed to understand about combat, about predators and prey, even about the natural order of the universe, all of it had just been casually invalidated by a cargo handler who was now checking the time on her wrist chronometer. Brandon Torres, in his technical booth, was the first to break the silence. Did anyone else's recording equipment register what just happened? Because according to my sensors, that punch generated approximately 0.04 newtons of force, which should barely qualify as a light tap, but somehow resulted in complete kinetic energy transfer that defies, well, everything we know about physics. Commander Mali was nodding slowly, the expression of someone whose worst fears had just been confirmed. "That's humans for you," he said to nobody in particular. "They don't follow the rules because nobody ever told them what the rules were supposed to be." Admiral Vashi finally managed to reconnect his jaw, producing a soft clicking sound. "Commander Mali, exactly how many humans are there in known space?" Mali consulted his military database. Official count is approximately 12 billion, spread across 47 worlds and about 600 space stations. General Kraftnog looked up from his notes. "And they can all do that?" "Well," Mali said thoughtfully, "Amy's probably not even in the top percentile for combat effectiveness. Most humans consider her occupation, what do they call it, a desk job." The arena fell silent again as several thousand alien minds simultaneously tried to process the implications of 12 billion beings who could casually punch bioengineered apex predators into existential confusion. Amy, meanwhile, had found someone who looked official and was asking about the nearest cafeteria. "Excuse me," she said politely, "but do you know if the food court serves anything that isn't still moving? I know some species prefer live food, but I really just want a sandwich." The medical team finally reached Mortyn. who was still sitting in the middle of the arena looking like someone had just explained quantum mechanics to him using interpretive dance. The lead medic, a competent healer-class Vraxian named Dr. Keloth, ran her scanner over the bioengineered Predator and immediately called for backup. "I need a neurological specialist, a trauma counselor, and does anyone know how to treat existential shock?" she announced over her comm unit. "His physical systems are fine, but his threat assessment protocols appear to have, well, they've basically given up and gone home." Mortyn blinked slowly, his gaze wandering around the arena like he was seeing it for the first time. When his eyes finally settled on Amy, who was still chatting with an official about lunch options, he made a small whimpering sound that no apex predator should ever be capable of producing. Meanwhile, Judge Quintera was having his own crisis. As a judicial Nexian, he was supposed to be impartial, logical, and capable of making clear rulings based on established Federation combat regulations. The problem was that nothing in the regulations covered what to do when reality stopped making sense. That is to say, the match appears to have concluded with he paused, consulting his official rule book, flipping through pages frantically. "There's no precedent for this. The human struck once, Mortyn is conscious and physically undamaged, but clearly unable to continue combat due to what do I even call this? Psychological knockout?" suggested his assistant. "Is that a thing?" "It is now." Judge Quintara cleared his throat and activated the arena's announcement system. "By unanimous decision of the, by virtue of look, the human wins, okay? I don't know how, I don't know why, but she definitely wins." Commander Tom Malley was having the most satisfying "I told you so" moment of his entire military career. He stood up in the observation deck and addressed the stunned crowd with the air of someone who had been vindicated by the universe itself. "I tried to warn you," he announced, his voice carrying clearly in the shocked silence. "I specifically said that humans weren't what they appeared to be." Did anyone listen? No. But did I serve with humans during actual combat operations? Yes. Did I see a human soldier punch through a reinforced bunker door because the lock was taking too long? Also yes. Admiral Vashi turned to stare at him. "You never mentioned the bunker door incident." "You never asked. And frankly, after watching Amy here, I'm starting to think that Soldier was just having an off day." Over in the betting booth, Quartermaster was experiencing what economists would later classify as total market collapse due to reality failure. His quantum calculator had given up entirely and was now just displaying a screensaver of peaceful meadows. The betting pools had generated payouts that would require the economic output of 3-star systems to cover. "The good news," he announced to the crowd in a voice that suggested good news was relative, "is that exactly 7 beings bet on the human. The bad news is that we owe them approximately 47 trillion credits, 2 mining colonies, and the deed to Station Nexus 7. Several alien millionaires were staring at their suddenly worthless betting slips like they contained the secrets of the universe. Which, in a way, they did, the secret being never bet against a species that evolved on a planet trying to kill them." Amy, completely oblivious to the economic chaos she had just caused, had finally found someone who could answer her question about food. "There's a Terran-style cafeteria on level 7, a helpful Centaurian clerk informed her. They serve what humans call normal food there." "Great. Thanks," Amy said cheerfully. She turned to wave at the crowd, completely missing the fact that half of them flinched when she moved. "This was fun. Thanks for letting me help out." She started walking toward the arena exit, pausing only to pat Mortyn gently on the shoulder as she passed. The bioengineered Predator whimpered again and tried to make himself smaller. General Kraftnog was frantically updating his portable tactical computer, his tusks clicking together in concentration. "Human threat assessment upgrading from negligible to what comes after catastrophic? Apocalyptic?" suggested his aide. "Perfect. Humans' apocalyptic threat level recommend immediate diplomatic contact, suggest offering them whatever they want before they realize what they're capable of." He paused in his typing and looked up at the arena, where Amy was now chatting with a janitor about the proper disposal of bioengineered Predator shed scales. "Actually," he muttered, Maybe it's better if they don't realize what they're capable of. The galaxy's scary enough already. As Amy finally left the arena, whistling a tune that made several predatory species feel inexplicably nervous, the assembled crowd sat in contemplative silence, each processing the same fundamental question: what else didn't they know about humans? The answer, as they would soon discover, was pretty much everything. Amy made it exactly 3 corridors before her personal communicator buzzed with a message from her cargo supervisor. "Where are you?" "We've got a shipment of Altarian silk that needs to be loaded in 20 minutes. She sighed and quickened her pace, completely unaware that behind her, the Galactic Combat Federation was holding its first emergency session in over 2 centuries. Motion to immediately ban all humans from competitive combat sports, Admiral Vashi announced, his scales still a nervous purple. "Seconded," said General Kraftnog. "Thirded," added Judge Quintara. "Is thirded even a word?" asked Commander Molly. "It is now. All in favor of pretending this never happened and quietly updating our species database to reclassify humans as apocalyptic-level Deathworlders?" The vote was unanimous. You see, the problem with underestimating Deathworlders isn't just that they're tougher than they look, it's that they don't even realize they're supposed to be tough. Amy went back to loading cargo, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just single-handedly restructured interstellar combat regulations and caused the galaxy's first physics-based mental health crisis. Within 6 months, humans were quietly banned from participating in combat sports, weightlifting competitions, and anything involving the phrase test of strength. The official reason given was equipment compatibility issues. But everyone knew the real reason. Nobody wanted to explain to their insurance companies why their apex predators needed therapy. As Amy was leaving the station that evening, a young reporter managed to catch up with her and ask what she thought about her historic victory. Amy paused, considered the question seriously, and then delivered the line that would be quoted in xenobiology textbooks for the next 3 centuries. "Honestly, I was expecting more of a challenge. Back home, we call that kind of workout a warm-up. But hey, at least I got a free lunch out of it." And that, dear readers, is how the galaxy learned that the most dangerous predator in known space is a bored human with 40 minutes to kill before their next shift.